Okay, aloha mai kako. My name is Nigel. I'm a planner with KUA, and this is our call to start the month, September 2023. Happy to invite Kuʻulei Rodgers here from HIMB to talk about Haena. Thank you, Kuʻulei. She's done some research in Haena, and since the 2015 Haena CBSFA designation, a lot has happened on the research side, community building side, and fish biomass side, which Kuʻulei is going to talk about today. And just really happy and thankful for the time that you're spending with us, Kuʻulei. And I'm just going to hand it to you. Mahalo nui.
Mahalo. So I'm a researcher. Oh, let me share screen first. Sorry. That might help. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay. So I'm a researcher at the University of Hawaii at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology at the Coral Reef Ecology Lab. And in 2016, our lab was asked by the Division of Aquatic Resources, or DAR, to determine the efficacy of the Haena Community-Based Subsistence Fishing Area, or the CBSFA. The Haena community, oh, wait, it's not advancing. Hang on. Let's see, maybe, do I have to go out? Next. Yeah. Oh, I gotta do that every time? Sorry. So the Haena community, in collaboration with the state of Hawaii's DLNR, established the CBSFA in 2015. And this was a long and arduous process. The community and the Hui Maka'ainana o Makana worked diligently to establish this first CBSFA in the state. There are many other communities that have applied for CBSFA status. Miloli'i on the Big Island recently became only the second CBSFA. And with growing interest in community management, it was vital to determine whether or not the initial Haena CBSFA was effective. And that's why it was so closely monitored and evaluated. The goals of this biologically and culturally managed area are to support fishing and gathering for subsistence, religious, and cultural purposes in a sustainable manner through effective management practices of the local community and the state working together. This partnership includes monitoring, enforcement, education, and outreach. The Hui Maka'ainana o Makana was established by lineal descendants of Haena, and this nonprofit organization has a curatorship agreement with the state parks to restore and maintain 15 acres, including a community-driven monitoring program, lo'i restoration, poi mill restoration, and assisting the state with the Haena State Master Plan, along with many numerous tasks that they have. Part of our evaluation of the efficacy of the Ocean Management Plan included annual biological surveys and strategic environmental and physical monitoring. We compared our results with an earlier baseline conducted prior to the establishment of the CBSFA. So in 2013 and 14, Alan Friedlander's Fisheries Ecology Research Lab conducted baseline surveys of fishes within the proposed CBSFA and the Makua Pu'uhonua, that yellow area over there. And that is a juvenile fish habitat. This before-after control impact, or BACI sampling design, allowed for a sampling framework that compares marine communities before the initiation of management action to any changes that occur after the CBSFA regulations are in place. So over a 5-year period, from 2016 to 2020, we conducted 670 surveys. Our transects are called kahus, and that stands for Kauai Assessment of Habitat Use, since they're designed to provide data for the caretakers or guardians of the reef, the kahus. From these surveys, we determined changes in fish communities, including biomass and abundance, fish reproductive size, trophic levels, diversity, endemism, which also includes native and introduced species, and changes in resource or food fishes. We also look at urchins and other large invertebrates that can be indicative of ecosystem declines. And we monitor changes in coral cover, coral bleaching, and lemur. The DAR Kauai monitoring team has continued these surveys since 2020. Now, to determine the effectiveness of the CBSFA management regulations, we have to think long-term. Biological populations fluctuate from location to location, and this is why we need so many transects to get to that larger picture. We also have to look across time because it can take years to determine if the shifts we're seeing today are really moving in that direction, because they can be cyclical and you can't see the real patterns until you continue to monitor. So this is similar to the stock market and to the temperature, global temperature record, where you can see from these graphs that there are ups and downs, but the overall pattern is a clear increase in the stock market over this 10-year period and in the temperature record over the last century. However, if you were only to look at 1 year, you'd see the opposite pattern because of those overall fluctuations. If you just look at 1 decade, the 1940s for temperature, it shows a different pattern. Halfway through that decade, it looks like the temperature is dropping. So the same is true of the stock market, where in 2008, there were major declines away from that overall upward trend. And this is also true of environmental monitoring. And this is why long-term monitoring is so important to understand what's really happening. This became very clear to us in Haena when a short-term catastrophic flood event occurred and shifted some of those trends temporarily. For the first 2 years, in 2016 and 17, our monitoring results showed a statistically significant increase inside the CBSFA as compared to outside the boundaries for fish abundance, biomass, piscivores, or top predatory fishes like ulua, and food fishes. The Makua Pu'uhonua, where fishing regulations prohibited any take since 2015, reported a significant increase in 2017 in large-sized fish and 7 species of food fishes. Now, to look at resource fishes, Haena community interviews were previously conducted in 2003, 2007, and 2008 by community groups, and this identified the important food fish species and their abundances. Traditional families from Haena documented their nearshore marine resources central to their subsistence and cultural practices. And these species, along with the perceived condition of each resource, are listed in a gradient from excellent to POW, or finished. Now, what we found in the 2016-17 kahus was that the resource fishes that the community perceived to be in excellent or good condition were fairly prevalent. Of the fishes categorized as fair or limited, very few were observed. And these results were very consistent with the community. The only disparity were 2 fish species perceived to be in poor condition by the community that didn't align with our survey results, and these were omilu and kala. They're commonly found on our transects. But it's important to remember that fishers are the best evaluator and judge of even the slightest shifts because they're in the ocean on a regular basis over a long period of time. And we conduct our surveys only during the summer months. So this is one reason why it's really important to incorporate community data into long-term monitoring data. So the results of the first 2 years showed an increase within the CBSFA. Then in April of 2018, as most of you must remember, a massive flood occurred. The Hanalei rain gauge recorded 51 inches, setting a record for Hawaii for the highest rainfall over a 24-hour period since it was recorded. This reversed the increasing trend that we saw earlier. huge declines occurred in urchin populations and fish. These were observed at the shallow Haena transects, but not at the deep ones, supporting the occurrence of depth-specific freshwater impacts, because shallow water is more affected once there's mixing and low tides and it reaches the bottom and the fish move away from these low salinity areas. Results at the shallow Pila'a reef flat, also on the north shore of Kauai, we found that the sediment and freshwater associated declines were also there. For urchins, it was 52% decline, and in coral bleaching was 55% increases. Now, this occurred in the flood-prone east area, but not in the west area where there's less freshwater and sediment input. So analysis showed a significant shift in community structure before and after the flood at both Pila'a and Haena. So what happened since that time? Some recovery has been observed following the effects of the flood. Octocorals and urchins may serve as a bioindicator or proxy of community health following input of fresh water, nutrients, and/or sediment from storms. So the octocoral sarcothelia decreased substantially in all sectors after the flood. Although there was a slight drop in coral cover at shallow stations outside the CBSFA, when combining all depths, sectors showed only a slight increase post-flood in coral cover. Sea urchin populations also increased slightly post-flood following that significant decline. And fish abundance and biomass were highest in 2017, and it showed a slight post-flood recovery, but not as high as it was in 2017. So if you look at the overall 5-year results, they show significant fish increases in certain areas. For fish abundance or density between 2016 and 2020, despite the significant declines following the 2018 flood, you do see an overall increase. So a rebound effect did occur post-flood inside the CBSFA and the Makua Pu'uhonua, with significant increases in the number of fishes, but no increases outside the CBSFA. However, for fish biomass, although there were statistical increases pre-flood, post-flood increases had not yet reached the 2017 levels, like I mentioned. Now, if you look on a finer scale, when you look at reproductively mature resource fishes at the species level, there were increases that were evident. We looked at 19 resource fishes. The density of 4 large reproductive fishes were significantly higher inside the boundaries of the reserve compared to outside, Manini, Pualu, Veke, and Umamole. If you look at all of the CBSFA, inside and outside, there were 7 species of reproductively mature resource fishes. So resource fishes have a range of life history characteristics, so recovery rates will differ. The first species likely to show an increase are things like goatfish and small parrotfish, based on their short lifespans, with full recovery for these faster growing species possible within 10 years. But recovery for larger long-lived species such as jacks, surgeons, and large parrotfish can take 20 to 40 years. So this 5-year efficacy review shows trends of increase for some fish species, but it'll take further monitoring of fish populations to determine the full effect of management activities. So the big question, were these management goals met? Management goals included preserve and protect nursery habitat for juvenile reef fishes. So within the Pu'uhonua, both the density of fishes and their biomass have significantly increased overall, like I said. A substantial increase occurred from 2014 to 2017, with the decline in 2018. And then a significant recovery also occurred in the number of fishes since the flood. However, it has not returned to 2017 levels. Medium-sized and large fishes show a significant increase from the 2014 baseline until the 2018 flood. Small juvenile fishes and medium-sized fishes have statistically increased also following the flood. Another management goal was to increase the abundance of native fish species, limu kohu, he'e, urchins, lobsters, opihi, and other shellfish. So just what's within the purview of this study. We can only talk about the native fishes and the urchins. However, the opihi counts have been conducted historically and are ongoing by the Hui Maka'aina na Omakana. We found native fishes, the endemic ones found only in Hawaii and indigenous found in Hawaii and elsewhere, inside the reserve show a statistically significant increase from 2014 to 2017, while no increase was found outside the boundaries. The same pattern was found for introduced species, although the sample size was significantly smaller, with no introduced species like ta'ape, to'a, roi found on 70% of our transects. Following the decline in all fish communities the year of the flood, only indigenous fishes outside the reserve showed a recovery effect. So another management goal was to increase percent coral cover by reducing human impacts on coral reef resources. Coral cover has remained fairly stable at Haena following the 2014-2015 statewide bleaching event that reduced coral cover by 34%. Coral bleaching following the flood event was significant, but did not result in extensive mortality. Increased ocean temperatures and freshwater intrusion are the major drivers of coral mortality. Links to human impacts are more difficult to determine because we don't have any direct human contact counts. So it's difficult to make that correlation right now until we get that. But although our Kahu transect showed coral was stable in the wider Haena area, our 30-foot depth long-term monitoring site has declined. So our lab developed the Coral Reef Assessment and Monitoring Program in 1998, and one of our first sites we established was in Limahuli within the Haena CBSFA. CRAMP is a network of over 65 sites throughout the main Hawaiian Islands to determine changes in the marine populations. DAR now monitors these sites throughout the state. And on Kauai, we have Miloli'i, Nualolokai, Ho'ai in Poipu, Hanalei, Limahuli, and more recently, Pila'a. The Limahuli site shows coral recovery since the 2014-15 statewide bleaching event at the shallow reef flat, with total coral cover remaining stable over the past 5 years. The deeper offshore station shows no signs of recovery and continues to decline from a high of 20% before the 2015 bleaching to an unprecedented low of 2% in 2020. Now, to more fully understand the reserve effect and how it differs for food and non-food fish, a ratio is generated inside the reserve compared to outside. If the reserve is effective in protecting fish species, then the biomass and number or density of food fishes should be greater inside the reserve, and it should increase over time. So the graph on the left is fish biomass, and the one on the right is number or density of fishes. The red line represents food fishes like beke, and the blue line is non-food fishes like butterfly fishes. You see the greatest declines occurring in 2020 and also in 2018, the year of the flood. The lines remained together until 2020. Now, this suggests this is a result of factors other than fishing. The exception in 2020 for number of fishes, when the ratio for food and non-food fishes diverges, as you can see there, This is suggestive of increased fishing pressure in 2020, the year of the COVID closures, where many residents were relying on subsistence fishing and working from home. So in summary, there have been statistically significant increases in fish abundance, biomass, piscivores, and food fishes since the establishment of the CBSFA. There was a significant reserve effect pre-flood, showing increases inside the CBSFA as compared to outside the boundaries. The survey data reflects the community perception of the condition of the food fishes. There have been a significant increase in 7 species of food fishes since the change in management for fishing practices. And the long-term monitoring site at Limahuli shows a drop in coral cover following the statewide bleaching, but the larger Haena area is stable. And shifts in fish and urchin populations were drastically reduced following the massive flood event. I just want to acknowledge so many people, because it took a lot in these 5 years to be able to do this. And it's wonderful to work with everyone in this collaborative effort. The Hui Makainana o Makana, with Presley Wan as president, has the passion to continue their efforts into the future. They've accomplished so much so far. The community members have helped with our fish behavior surveys and other aspects of this project, while maintaining their own monitoring program under the direction of Emily Cadiz. Because of the large number of transects, DAR monitoring teams from Oahu, Maui, and Kauai helped us conduct most of these surveys. In the early years, DOBOR, the state's Boating and Ocean Recreation Division, provided vessel support for these surveys for the offshore sites. DAR will continue to monitor and evaluate the changes at Haena through time. But again, I want to emphasize that fishers are in the water throughout the year, and over time, they see minute differences in fish populations. So community, traditional, and current ecological knowledge is invaluable. Mahalo.
All right, on. Mahalo Kuʻulei.
Okay. Trying to stop sharing. Okay, I don't know how to stop sharing. Oh, I see it. Sorry. Stop share.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna ask one question, and then if you have a question, jump in. But I guess, who do you present these findings to, and how were they received? Like, you presented to the board and they say yes or no, or?
I presented to the board of Land and Natural Resources, which we had to do following the last year of the project. We have also gone several times to Limahuli Gardens, to community events, to Hui Makainana o Makana events at their lo'i. We've had talks here on Oahu as well. I testified at the Miloli'i when they were trying to get their CBSFA going, and it was well received. I don't know if that would have been true had things completely declined, but it looked, from what we saw, that there are a lot of different things that can increase or decline fish populations as well as any marine population. And a good example is at Pila'a on Kauai. So we started working at Pila'a in 2002, and then we went back about 2016 and have continued working there. But what we found there, which I believe is true of places elsewhere in the state, especially open coastlines, which would include Haena, not so much for bays like Kaneohe or Hanauma, but for open access coastlines. What we saw there is that there were a number of events that stopped the coral cover and fish populations from reaching an equilibrium. They couldn't stabilize. They would go up and down and up and down. So there was this huge sediment event that I'm sure a lot of you remember, in 2002, wiped out one whole section and everything crashed. Then it started to recover some. As we were continuing to monitor, there are these huge storm events that were occurring, and some from different directions that were really breaking a lot of the coral cover, which affects the fish population, urchins, everything. And then the bleaching event occurred. And so each time it's going up, starting to recover, going down again. Then the freshwater flood affected Pila'a just like it did Haena. Went up, went down again. And so I don't think these areas can reach a real equilibrium. You can't really bring them back to pristine types of conditions because there are too many global and local disturbances that occur. Long answer, sorry.
Oh, mahalo. I do want to invite Auntie Pua if you wanted to share anything on the Hui side, I guess in response or in
Hui Kalamai, I'm driving, so I would prefer to just listen, but I want to say mahalo to Ku'ulei for sharing out for all of her findings for our Hui. Mahalo.
beautiful. Mahalo. Drive safe.
Thank you.
I have a queue of questions. So any questions? I'm not. Oh, go, Kev.
Well, you said you did like 600 something surveys. So what does that mean? Like, what is each actual survey when you say a survey was done? Is that an actual like individual diver, or what does all that mean?
It means 2 individual divers. Prior to that, we get 100 to 150 points each summer, and we have GPS coordinates. We go down on that site, and we have 2 sets of divers, some shallow, some deep, inside, outside the CBSFA. And you lay a transect line, a 25-meter transect line. One person does the fish, the other person does benthic. They take pictures so that we can later look out at the coral cover. And then the fish person comes back along the line and looks at urchins, limu, anything else. And then the other person, the second person, will also look at the surrounding area, and we categorize what kind of habitat is it? What is the rugosity or the topographical relief? Because as you know, if it's sand, you might find some beke, but you're not going to find lots of other stuff. So we have to know so we can stratify it and put different types of environmental conditions together. So it's a lot of work to do all of these transect. One transect probably takes us 25 minutes.
So when you say a transect, that's one survey?
Yeah,
Or
one
that's
survey, one site. Yeah, one station.
That's plenty.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of work, but it was so much fun because we were working with DAR guys. We were working with Hui Makainana guys. I mean, everyone was so supportive in that community. I've worked in a lot of communities, and I have seen a lot of support in different communities, but I have to say that Hui Makainana, they have a real camaraderie. And even though if there are any disagreements, they can come to a consensus. And I think that's been why they have been so successful, because they have good leadership, they have good people that are supporting that, good staff, and the community buy-in is important as well.
Awesome. Have any of the results been compared to like other fishery management styles like Pupukea MLCD? I know you showed some of the cramp survey stuff, but just to see like how a CBSFA might work differently or whatnot.
Pupukea, we have cramp ones at transects at 3 tables near Sharks Cove. We also have Hanauma Bay. So we've been doing a Hanauma Bay carrying capacity survey for the last 6 years. And this is looking to see how visitors or the human impact is actually correlated with the populations. And we were so fortunate. I mean, it's horrible what happened with COVID, but when they shut that down, it was the first time Hanauma Bay was shut down for 10 months. And we were going there before, during the closure, and then after the closure. So we could really see, are these corals recovering? Are the fish moving around? And it's probably indicative of most areas, except Hanauma Bay is not fished, right? Yeah, you can't fish there. There may be some poaching, but very little. So that's the main difference, and it's an enclosed area. So it doesn't compare real well with Haena. Compares a little better with Pupukea, but that's a North Shore environment. But what we found at Hanauma Bay, the fish really did move around. Well, like you would expect, monk seals were coming in. Every time we went, there were monk seals on the beach. Now, once in a while, you'll see a monk seal. Turtles didn't change that much. The fish, though, really moved around, and bigger fish were found almost immediately. So they must have been coming from outside. It's not like these were juvenile fishes that were growing. So everything increased by biomass, number, all the fish populations increased. And you would see, if you're familiar with Hanauma Bay, Keyhole is the area where choke tourists, right? And some of the other areas like Witch's Brew don't have as many visitor impacts as Keyhole does. And Keyhole had a lot of fishes that came into that area, all different species. It just was really nice to see. It changed a lot when there were not people. And then when they reopened at 25% capacity, and then later 50% capacity. So we were able to track that as well. But with a place like Hanauma Bay, they close 2 days a week now. And they're letting locals in early, and they have less numbers, so that's good. But at these large numbers, you're not going to see huge changes. You're not going to see a lot of recovery. You may see some stabilization, but especially in corals, if you go look on the shallow reef flat, the corals are really in vertical surfaces, in areas where you can't trample them. And they're really strong skeletal strengths. So it's not something that can be easily broken by a fin or stepping on it. So it's a different situation, but we do compare all of the cramp sites with each other, as well as looking at specific sites like Kahikili on Maui, where DAR has been monitoring this site for a long time. And because we saw that decrease in herbivores, that's why they made that Kahikili herbivore fisheries management area. So you can pinpoint certain areas, and we continued our cramp surveys for decades, and now DAR is taking them over because it should be a state program. And DAR Maui always did it, but DAR Kauai didn't have a team, and Hilo didn't have a team at that time. So now that they do, they're integrating this program. So they'll have information on changes throughout the state.
Wow. Emily has a question. Have you published the results?
Of the Haena CBSFA?
I believe.
We have not yet. It is in review right now. So it should be out soon. It is in a report. And that report can be found on the DAR site. That's the 5-year one. And then the Pila'a one was published. And that one, I can't remember, was it environmental monitoring? I don't know, it's in one of the journals. I'm first author, so you could look that one up, that tells about the changes over time and the differences.
So, going to question.
Kuʻulei, when you do these I'm just trying to ask questions about how these work and the processes. When you do this kind of contract with the state, are you diving with state people, or is it you do everything with yourself and grad students, or is DAR present at the surveys and diving with you?
Yeah, that's a good question because this is a collaborative effort. So this one was different than others. We normally just ourselves, our lab, other UH certified divers dive on these sites and do these transects. But this one, there were too many, and we needed the DAR support from the boats and the DOBOR support. So they were also diving with us. They brought, like I said, teams from Maui, teams from Oahu, and then when the Kauai team was in place. And they also were helping us in the Pila'a surveys as well. So it depends where we are. Like we had a Hihikina'u surveys with rangers, and we did those ourselves. It really depends on the project and how much work there is and how much they want to get involved. But all the data, all the analysis comes to us.
So you guys are still doing the surveys?
DAR is now conducting surveys.
Oh.
I've not seen results yet from them. I was gonna talk to them and see about that. We did some training with DAR to show them for several years, and we even had one of the DAR technicians that was with our lab for a while, so she knew how to analyze the data. And so eventually, I guess they will come out with how this is progressing over time.
Mahalo Ku'ulei, and thanks Kua for providing this opportunity to hear from Ku'ulei on this. I was thinking about what you shared about Hanauma Bay, and I don't know exactly how to formulate the question. It's been too long since I was a science student, but it's something like this. We see the fish and the other animals return when people go away. We have that documented now. But is anybody figuring out how to figure out if they're making more babies at those times too, right? If their populations are actually increasing, or if we're just like, oh, hey, there you are. You came over here because no one was over here and it's quiet now.
That's a really good question, Jocelyn. And the reason it's so difficult to figure that out is because fish recruitment happens sporadically. I mean, it may happen in the summer, but some years certain fish species spawn a lot. Other years, not so much. Sometimes there's these huge recruitments of a certain species of fish, other times not. So to be able to pick that apart, you need long-term data on fish sizes. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like it's so important. There's this whole body of work and questions and policy now around carrying capacity. And I feel like, somehow we got to get our arms around, it's presumably it's good for the ecosystem for it to get a rest from people in any kind of way, right? For a period of time. But I'm wondering, what kinds of questions and how can we support science to understand these carrying capacity questions that, are affecting tourism and these kind of issues. Yeah, overall, right? I haven't formulated the question exactly in my mind, but I'm thinking about it from, the policy standpoint. I want to be able to point to some studies that say, you see, look, like they were there. Not only were they there, but it's good overall. Right? We need that, that longer term data set, the picking apart by class size, as you're saying, also for the coral, right? It just, all of the information. It needs a massive amount of data, it sounds like.
Have you seen Alan Friedlander's paper on the mokus? So it's on, I think this was the MLCD ones. And it had Hanauma Bay as one of them. And it showed the differences in fish from all the data, our data, his data, DAR's data. And it showed by size. And it showed when they were fish feeding, when there were 4 million people a year. So it tracks that. So that's one to look at. But again, it's a very difficult thing unless you have an area closed for a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah. And part of where my question's coming from too is I'm starting to hang out with the legislature more, for better or worse. And they want to learn, I think, and I'm trying to figure out like what kind of information can be shown to them, what kind of, speakers like yourself, can we show the legislators so that they have pertinent information about these that they can think about when they have these bills before them, right? About carrying capacity, about all this other stuff. So it's like, what sort of presentations they need, what scientists do they need to hear from, what communities do they need to hear from? Anyway, it's kind of floating around in my brain now, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to think out loud with you guys.
Yeah, fish are so variable, but other things can act as proxies for fish, like coral cover or even the topographical relief, or one of the things that was real easy to be able to look at was water visibility before, after, during the times when tourists are there, when the bay is closed. Even Waikiki, it was so much clearer when the tourists were not there. It makes a big difference, not just for the visibility, but for the corals and the fish as well.
You showed the graph with the perceived condition of certain areas. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, I guess is that qualitative data collection?
Yes. So they had done this to look at what the community thought and what they were seeing in terms of how many fish, species. The problem we had at first was like one of them would say uhu, but then there's like 7 species of uhu. So we had to, that's why their list was much shorter than our list. So we had to divide out the uhu. So some things we couldn't lump together, especially uhu, because some are a little deeper, they have different types of ecology. But that data, and we also did interviews with a lot of the members who get in there, of the community that get in there every day. And we talked to them. One really good example was Kili'i over there. He had told me, he came over for dinner one night when we were there, and he said, the Niue are real skinny ever since the flood. So I said, I don't know, what does that mean, skinny? And he said, oh, you can see it. When you throw them on the grill, they curl. She said, come tomorrow. So we went over there the next day. He went out, grabbed some fish, brought them in, threw them on the grill, and they curled. So I didn't see how it would be before. But after I asked around and everything, I found that if they have high protein, it makes a difference in it. Like the fishes that have to be in all the current, those fishes don't curl. If you have more fat, you do it. You don't, then you don't. So these fishes had changed their behavior and weren't eating as much as well. So they were seeing a lot of the Niue by the shoreline that we didn't see during the summer and we didn't see during our surveys, but it was there, and that what was happening. They just didn't, none of us really had an idea of why that was or what was happening. The data was showing, oh yeah, fish overall are declining, but some fishes were not. So you really need to have that day-to-day contact and the historical data, where a lot of the uncles would talk to us about things before, how they were before, what they're seeing now. So they knew the changes on a really minute scale.
One of the things we sort of encourage, in our vision, we have a vision, Haena Mumona, and we've been spending a lot of time in meetings, especially Alex, around community-based monitoring. But I mean, one reason we're involved in that is the idea that if our environment is our infrastructure, we need to develop a part of the economy where we have more jobs for young people monitoring. And so I guess my main question to you is, well, how much resources does it take to do what you currently do? Like, is it primarily hours, or is it actually a cost of other elements you need to do this kind of work? And then, well, how do you see that? Like, like, do we, like, if we had somebody who came out of, say, high school, got some certain certification, say in high school or like at Windward Community College, could they be part of a team that's doing this kind of work, that's paid, whether it's in the government, private sector, or in a nonprofit environment?
Yeah, they definitely can. It's not an option right now. A lot of places won't hire for that, but there are internships, and there are, like, we have set up programs in like monitoring programs for the community. So after we go in and do our thing, then like Ahihi Kina'u, when Matt Ramsey was there, we set up one for the rangers. They're only interested in food fish. So they know their food fish. You know, they can just write the Hawaiian name, whatever name they know, common names, and they can monitor their fish just as well as anyone else. They can tell what size there are as well as we can, you know, having been trained so many years. I mean, you certainly don't need a PhD to do that. They probably would do it better than we would do it because they can see, you know, little differences and changes. I think it's a good idea, and we have been at HIMB working to get a lot of local, not just from Manoa and Windward, but from other places as well. Like at Haena, we have Lei's son, Hanale, that is working with Ali'i, one of our graduate students, looking at the fish imu and being paid for this. So there are opportunities for that. And then if they're really interested, like Hanale is, then they can continue on doing something within their own community. There's a lot of community grants. And if the community can get some of these federal or state grants, then they can pay for these people in their community to do that type of work. And we would just come in to maybe do some training. I mean, not just us, there's Alan Friedlander's group. There's a lot of groups, TNC with Eric Conklin, a lot of these groups that have and can continue to help bring in these younger people.
How would you see this rolling out? Like, let's say it became an actual job within the community, say full-time job or part of a full-time job. Are they would this kind of person or position in a nonprofit, say like in Haena, say all the CBSFAs are able to hire full-time people to do monitoring? Is that something they do on a daily basis, or is it something you see would happen quarterly, or how might that work as a place-based job?
Well, there's different kinds of monitoring, right? So there's the monitoring that we do, like that in-water fish. There's also creel surveys, and those are looking at what fishers are catching, and so they get a catch per unit effort, and that can be done easily. They can do the opihi surveys in Haena. They do a lot of different kinds of surveys, so it can be a full-time job. And if you went to the legislature, like Jocelyn does, and petition to have those types of jobs, like Makai Watch, whatever, then it can be a permanent position as well. Or if the community, like Pua them, they actually generate funding from organizing all of the, you know, people, visitors that come in, then that can be used for those along with grants. So it can be a full-time thing for people that are interested.
Very, very good. We are close to the end. Last chance for any other questions. I know we're thinking a lot. I see all of us looking into the sky for answers, but appreciate you so much, Ku'ulei, for making time, and we'll be in touch. If you have questions, we'll be in contact.
Be sure.
Maybe one more, if I may.
Please.
And that is just like, you know, it's so helpful what you've been able to do with Haena, and Kua, as you know, has been a mighty source of inspiration and advocacy and community networking for other CBSFAs as well. What I don't know, and maybe you already know, so forgive me, you know, are there more similar studies being planned for the new and emerging CBSFAs that are out there?
So I do not know if that's true. I do know that the carrying capacity study at Sharks Cove, the Pupukea one, Pupukea Waimea, was funded. So 2 of my students actually worked there, along with several other people that they've hired. So that came through the legislature. I don't know if they're going to be monitoring every CBSFA. TNC was monitoring Ka'upulehu, but I'm not sure. I think it's going to be self-monitoring. So going in, teaching them, and then they do their monitoring. But I don't know of anything in the works. I haven't heard of it.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, Kua Gang, I don't know if you guys know, but I just feel like this because I also hang out with the foundation crowd, right? And so I'm wondering, like, is there a bucket of funding, say at the National Science Foundation or those other entities that's like focused on these kinds of Indigenous-led co-management efforts and making sure that there's sufficient funding for this research? Because I know that it's going to be increasingly important to be able to show these kind of results and explain them around the country, around the world, because otherwise, you know, it's all this, frankly, there's a lot of talk right now, right, about the kind of work that Hawaii is already doing in co-management. And, you know, it's wonderful to be able to demonstrate the results, the positive results and the learning from it, right, if we need to tinker with it too.
Yes, Makai Watch is a good, I see Pua said something about, or someone said something about Makai Watch. Makai Watch is a good example too, you know, where they can also be doing some of the human resource surveys and other things. And there are big pots of money in NOAA and other places that NIFWIF that will fund things like this. You just have to get someone to help with the grant writing or doing the grant writing yourself. That's the main part.
Yes, we look to the sky for that person. Right, Nigel?
I'd like one of those.
They're gonna fall out of the sky soon. Yeah. Perfect question to end. Thank you, Jocelyn. That is the question that we needed to ask. Yeah. Happy Friday, everybody. Drive safe and have a safe weekend.
Mahalo.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ku'ulei.
Mahalo.
Thank
Mahalo.
you. Hui ho.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.